How are you? You
So
look great.
good.
They're in many cases, and we like to call them kissing ovaries. But the main reason for repeat monitoring every few days is to take a look at.
Hi, I am Kayla Barnes, and I'm going to take you guys on a really special and personal journey with me. As you guys know, all things female health, from fertility and just general health optimization, is what we really dive deep in on my platform. And we are going to be doing some egg embryo freezing. I'm going to go into deeper detail as to why I'm doing this, but as you guys know, I'm 34. All of my fertility metrics look really incredible, but my husband and I are excited to have maybe 6+ babies. So we want to be really cautious and on the safe side and have ample options. And so I'm going to let my incredible doctor talk to you guys later about, what my current status looks like, what we're doing. I'm going to talk about why I chose her, because it was a really intentional decision. I've interviewed a lot of different fertility doctors around the LA area, and I'm excited to share this story with you. So thank you for watching this video. I've been doing the meds at home, couple meds. I started with 2, now I've introduced 3, and I think we started on the 30th, so we might be doing an egg retrieval this weekend, right?
Yeah, so right now your stim day 10 or 11, I have to double check.
Yeah.
But usually on average, most women will be triggered, which is to essentially help the eggs to mature on stimulation day 8 to 12.
Okay.
It's kind of a large range, but that is the average overall.
Yeah, so we're gonna go, I've been coming in about every 2 days just to check the progress. We're doing an intravaginal ultrasound, so everything looks like it's going well so far, right?
Incredibly well. So,
So
great ovaries.
yeah, thank you. Well, we'll take you along.
Hi, my name is Dr. Sasha Hakman. I am Kayla's fertility doctor, and as you all know by now, Kayla is undergoing an ovarian stimulation cycle. So we're essentially giving her higher dose of hormones to help stimulate the follicles within the ovaries in hopes of getting as many eggs in a healthy way as we can from a single cycle. So this is an ultrasound of her ovaries right now. We're pretty far into the stimulation process, and I anticipate that we'll probably be able to trigger, meaning the last medication that you take to mature your eggs before an egg retrieval in a few days. So this is one ovary here, and this is the other ovary. As they start to enlarge and the follicles grow, they start to sort of come close together in many cases, and we like to call them kissing ovaries. But the main reason for repeat monitoring every few days is to take a look at the follicle size and see how it's responding to the medications. So it allows me to see if I need to up her dose, reduce her dose, or keep it the same. It also lets me know if she's getting close to that trigger shot so that we can schedule her egg retrieval. And just as an FYI, the trigger shot happens exactly 35 to 36 hours before the egg retrieval, so that it gives it enough time to mature the eggs, but it's before the actual process of ovulation occurs so that I can capture those eggs in the retrieval.
As you guys know, and I kind of mentioned in the intro, you all know I just turned 34. Based on like my labs, from a metabolic health perspective, from everything that we can see on paper, my fertility looks good, right?
Yeah, so upon initial evaluation, there's really no cause for concern at this point in time. You have really great ovarian reserve, and although ovarian reserve is not the be-all, end-all for reproductive health as well as likelihood to conceive, when you're talking about stimulating the ovaries, a woman who has higher ovarian reserve really kind of on average will tend to get a better outcome in their ovarian stimulation as long as there's no history of PCOS or any other metabolic condition or endocrinopathy that can negatively affect ovulation or egg quality.
Yeah, and I've been, really blessed that really, consistent cycles. I mean, I really, believe a lot of this has to do with the fact that I'm really focused on this total toxic burden, and this is just my opinion here, guys. But also the literature is now showing that if you are exposed to endocrine disrupting chemicals, that can directly impact your AMH, right?
Yeah, so we're having more and more evidence about this, and you and I, while I was even scanning you, we talked about this, how for women who have PCOS, for instance, a lot of it is multifactorial, and so what that means is that we know that there are some genetic components, some genetic links to PCOS, especially if you have twin sisters. There's a 70% likelihood that both twins will have PCOS. It's not 100% because there's the environmental component, but more and more growing evidence is showing that if you have the genetic predisposition and you are highly exposed to endocrine disrupting chemicals and environmental toxins, that will not only cause the disease, but worsen the progression of the disease.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like with PCOS that we have the environmental toxins, and we're going to do a long form podcast, like, probably a couple hours on all the questions that I got from my Instagram. So we will do that in a podcast format. And really dive deep into the science. But this is kind of, I just want to explain why we're doing this too. But we have the endocrine disrupting chemicals, and then the fact that 6% of Americans are metabolically healthy. So, and luckily I fall into that metabolically healthy category. Thank goodness. I'm also wearing a Levels Dexcom during this time. I just wanted to see if we would notice any substantial changes being on these medications. So, going back to a little bit of why I decided to do this. So, if I'm relatively young and healthy, why am I doing this? And am I doing eggs or am I doing embryos? So the answer is we are interested, my husband and I, we got married about a year ago in September, so a little over a year ago. We both came from big families. I was one of 5 growing up, and he was one of 6. So we want to have a lot of children. We also feel really called to do that. So we would be, incredibly blessed with how many of our children God gives us, but also we would be happy with 5, 6, 7 kids. And I'm a big planner. I'm very deliberate with everything that I do. So it made a lot of sense to me before we started to try to have, go through this process, do embryos, which was a whole big conversation I'll talk about a little bit. And then so we can kind of start family planning backwards. So I think, being a Christian, it's a controversial subject of do you do eggs or embryos? And as we were going through this process, first of all, you've been so incredibly helpful and supportive and clear. We realized that at the end of the day, you'll have to make embryos anyways at some point. So it's just, we are married. We are going to have all of our children together. So what we're doing is, if we get, let's say 25-ish eggs, we're probably going to do, 10 to 15 of those eggs to become embryos. And we are having all of those babies, right? So we also did FDA surrogate testing in case of the fact if we have 3 to 4 babies and then my body just says, no, you can't do this anymore. So we will still definitely use all of the eggs that we get that we create into embryos. And we're even going to take it a step further, which, we've talked about this. Yeah. We're going to, draw up a will, and these embryos that are created, we will be, giving them to an adoption agency. We'll go more through about what we're doing from a moral standpoint, in my opinion, with this. But what this is going to give us the ability to do is say, we have X amount of embryos, and then we can go backwards from our family planning. So let's say we're super blessed and we get 6, then we might just jump right into using those embryos for babies, and then we know, that we probably have 5 to 6 children, somewhere around there. The percentages I know are really hard for you guys to do because everyone's different, and it seems like most of the data is on, unfortunately, women with infertility. Yeah. But so yeah, that's why I'm doing this whole thing. I want to have a really big family. I want to, we want to make sure that happens. And so we're so excited to go through this process. And it also is just going to give me so much peace of mind. Of course, I would love to just trust the process, but I'm excited that we're going to have some sort of idea of where we're at. Yeah. And so thank you for being so flexible and so helpful and providing me so many resources throughout this whole process. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm super excited. We're on day 11. 10?
Day 11. Yeah, tomorrow will be STEM day 12.
Yeah, so in the podcast, I opened up a question box on my Instagram with tons of questions that we'll go through, from lifestyle factors with fertility and then when to do egg freezing, embryos, the difference, all the things. But yeah, today I just wanted you guys to kind of come into the office with me and meet Dr. Sasha Hakman and just talk a little bit about why we're doing this. Why don't we answer a few, like most of the commonly asked questions when you have someone new in the office? Because I've asked like a million questions.
So I would say one of the most common questions, especially when it comes to fertility preservation, whether it's egg freezing or embryo banking, is how many eggs do I need? And the reality is that that number depends on your age. So women who come in under the age of 35 will typically have the best prognosis because we know that even if you are healthy, the ovaries age. In fact, the ovaries age faster than any other organ in our body. And there's still a lot to be discovered there and a lot to understand, but we know that that is the case. And in fact, from the moment you hit puberty, every woman is losing about 1,000 eggs every month. And there is nothing we can do to stop that. Now, they are trying to escape the resting stage and come to a place where they're known as an antral follicle. So these are follicles that could be stimulated with medications, and that number varies. So the number of eggs needed, of course, will depend on so many variables. We do have prediction models that can help where you put in the patient age and it'll give you a rough estimate based on the current literature of how many eggs you may need. And this is where it's really helpful to consult with a fertility specialist and they can give you those numbers. Now, if there's already a known diagnosis of infertility prior to, say, egg freezing or embryo banking, then that may skew the numbers. And it's always important to remember that these numbers are based on averages where some will do better and some will do worse. And that is how we get an average. So there's still a lot of unknowns until you actually get to the point of retrieving those eggs. And even more so when we get to the point of making embryos for you, that will give us a lot of information on your fertility as well, because sometimes you might have a lower number of eggs that are being used to create embryos. But if most of them become embryos, we know that your husband's sperm, so Warren's sperm and your eggs seem to do really well together and are able to create a higher than average number of blastocysts, which are day 5 to 7 embryos. So yeah, it's a little bit of a complicated answer, but the gist of it is the younger you are, the less eggs you need. The older you are, that number becomes more and more exponential, especially after you pass the age of 40.
Yeah, I feel like that's a big question. Everyone asks, when should you do this? I mean, and the answer is like ideally before 35. Yeah.
I would say the sooner the better, but as long as you're in your early 30s, that's still great. You don't need to be in your 20s to do this. Even if you're in your late 30s, it's still probably worthwhile, but you have to expect that most likely once you enter the late 30s, you inevitably more often than not will have to do more than one cycle. There are obvious exceptions to that because some women just experience delayed ovarian aging in comparison to others, but just for the general population, that seems to be the case.
Yeah. I am so excited to figure out why some people experience delayed ovarian aging, because it feels like, I've interviewed a lot of academics on this topic as well, and we just don't have a lot of information right now. So
no. We don't. Anecdotally, I do see it running in families, although technically speaking, just because the rest of your family is really fertile doesn't mean that you're also very fertile, and just because the rest of your family is very infertile doesn't mean that you're infertile. So it doesn't always apply, but generally speaking, we always ask, if I get a history on every patient, I want to know when their mother went into menopause, because that could help potentially predict earlier onset of menopause for her daughter as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, guys, we're going to take you on the rest of the journey. We'll do the podcast and really get a lot of these important questions. I feel like this topic has been it's not taboo, but it's like not spoken about enough. And I feel like I've always wanted to have a place that women can ask real questions, get real answers. And this is, it's a very personal and like very sensitive topic, family
Yeah.
planning, fertility, and
Yeah.
I want to be as much of a resource to women and, you know, find experts like yourself to just give us what we know, at least at this point. So thank you so much
Yeah,
for
of
everything.
course.
And
Thanks for having me.
of course, I love working with you. I love just, I mean,
Likewise.
everything, your personality, and we have such good discussion. Dr. Hakman's super open to all of my kind of like maybe what some other doctors would think are like crazy ideas, but I'm always just like,
No, I love
what
it.
do you think about this? And what do you think about this supplement? And should I do this or should I do that?
Yeah.
And what about this? And so she's super open to that, which I really love and appreciate that about you, because I
course.
think, you know, just by bringing together communities of people with different ideas, it can maybe
Yeah.
help the overall
Yeah.
outcome.
And sometimes even as a physician, I learn from my patients, and that's the most important thing, is to be open-minded, and you get to learn a lot from different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
I can't wait. We are just a few days away from
Yes.
getting these eggs.
Yes, probably this weekend. So.
I know. Yeah, probably this weekend.
Yep.
So, yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for following along, and stay tuned for more.